Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Laurie Barkman. Laurie Barkman is a business transition sherpa with her firm SmallDotBig. She advises business owners on having more valuable sellable businesses, and as a partner with Stony Hill Advisors, a mergers and acquisitions firm, she guides them through the complex process of letting it go. Always like to start with kind of how did you get started in this? What got you into mergers and acquisitions? It's not a natural starting place for most people. So, like,
It's not a natural place, and for me, my origin story really goes back 20, 25 years being in business, and when I was a CEO and I was part of a company that was sold to a Fortune 50, that's really what got me interested in this deal side. We were being acquired. It was clearly not a merger. The total transaction was a pretty sizable one. It had $1 billion, more than $1 billion in enterprise value. So for me, who was part of the executive team, we knew this was the biggest deal of our lives. We wanted to make it successful, and then we also knew it wasn't just about the transaction; it was about the transition and the integration. So going through that on the deal side, after I left, I was part of the integration, and eventually I left the company. And after that, I went into private equity, and I was on the other side of the table for doing deals. This time, doing investing and trying to assess what would be the right thing for our partners and investors. And I got exposed to exit planning through some networks of mine. I was with a law firm. I was running business development for a law firm, so I got to know some of the other folks in the ecosystem, lawyers, of course, wealth managers, accounting firms, and I was starting to learn more about exit planning and this age wave tsunami. And so that's how I got into M&A. As I was spending time learning about exit planning, got certified from the Exit Planning Institute, got certified on the Value Builder platform. And I can also share a little bit of backstory about the name of my firm, Small.Big. But that's how I got into M&A. So I think that that's a key concern, Ron, when the business owner has given so much to this business, right? They've given up nights, weekends. They didn't go to the kids' baseball games. Maybe they've experienced a divorce. They've sort of been married to their job. And it's not only dissatisfying from a financial standpoint, but imagine the personal disappointment that someone might feel if ultimately they don't have a sellable business and they thought they did.
let's talk a little bit about like the process that you walk somebody through, and it's do any type of succession, even if it's preparing to hand that business to be controlled by another human being.
We talk about this a lot on my podcast. It's called Succession Stories, as you mentioned.
Right.
And I speak with founders who are Gen 1, and I speak with multi-generational companies. I've talked to Generation 9 and 10, by the way, which is a great interview. I talked to a mother-son. That business was founded in 1760, so that's a little bit of an
Wow.
anomaly. But nonetheless, one of the things that jumps out at me, if we just stick on the thread of family businesses for a second, there are the next generation leaders who are well suited, and that's part of a legitimate process to put into place is the education and experience that's required to be a leader in that business one day. So there could be a disconnect in any one of those fronts. They might not have the skills, they might not have the desire. I've talked to folks who they didn't want the chair. They didn't want to be CEO. They didn't want to be part of the company. And then lo and behold, years later, they're running it and they're doing a fantastic job. So all kinds of stories about how people start, from sweeping in the shop floor to really running, getting to know the sales environment and learning the business from the inside. There's a lot of good stories out there about where it's really worked well. Of course, there are stories where it hasn't worked as well. So the best transitions are well planned. Sometimes we do find that there's death, divorce, the 5Ds. Sometimes things happen that we don't control. So those are more contingency planning types of prep. But when we are more thoughtful about it and have time on our side to plan succession internally, that's great. Also external. And that was my experience. I was hired from the outside and as part of a long-term succession plan. And I've also talked with some professionals on my show about hiring outside CEOs. There's a great example of a family that I'm friends with here where I live in Pittsburgh, and they had a skip generation leader, meaning the generation wasn't ready. They were in their 20s and when their father's health started to decline, and they were not ready to assume the leadership role. So what the company did very, very effectively was they brought in someone from the outside to run the company, and part of his mission was to get the next generation ready. And then he retired, and it was a success story all around. There is some myth out there, and I think it has to do with the entrepreneurial spirit. So what I talk a lot about with companies that are multi-generational, call them mature businesses, is how do we bring them back to their entrepreneurial roots? And the innovations that Gen 1 or Gen 2, had in place, um, sometimes Gen 3 needs that latitude to really look forward and look for sustainability for the future. A great example of this is Highlights Magazine, Gen 4 CEO right now running it. And he's looking out beyond, he's saying this transcends him. This transcends who he is as a CEO. And he's a great leader. And what he's trying to put in place is how can this business, which is education for kids, live beyond, right? Whoever is the leader, whether it's family or not family. And it's so mission driven. It's such a great example. And they are putting in processes for innovation.
There is that. There's a lot of business owners out there to that either knowingly have everything in their head or sometimes unknowingly have a bunch of stuff in their head that they think everybody knows, but they seem to ask the owner on how to do things.
Yeah, we call that the hub and spoke problem, where they're the chief problem solver, and it feels good. They feel important. They feel needed. Um, this is their identity. They want to be wrapped up in the business. They know their customers' birthdays, kids, dogs' names. It feels great to have those relationships. But as you pointed out, if they're the chief rainmaker, if they're the chief problem solver, they have a hub and spoke problem. They have what we call also the owner's trap, where
Right.
they can't take a vacation. They can't have a sick day. The wheels of business will stop if they're not part of it. And that inherently is more risk for a buyer. It's not as transferable. It will have less value. And we'll lay that out, and we look at your income statement, and then we take a look at things that we call add backs. So from an expense standpoint, if you've had one-time expenses for the business that really aren't recurring, that the new owner wouldn't incur, that would go on the list. If you've had business expenses that, again, they're business expenses, but then you might also have had personal expenses running through the business. Those are choices business owners can make. It's good to really be clear and track those so that when we're doing this type of analysis, it's easy to calculate what those are, because we need to take those out. The new owner isn't going to make those same decisions. Same as interest payments, they might make different decisions about loans that you've taken out. They'll make different decisions on different expense categories, depreciation, et cetera. So what we do is we take those out. Also, things like PPP and EIDL, tax rebates that you may have gotten, we can't count on that for the future. So we need to take those out.